Chess YouTube, welcome back and welcome to the finals of the 2025 World Cup Tournament, aka a knockout tournament and maybe the single biggest, most exciting, most drama-filled tournament of the entire year. Now in the finals here, we don't have Gukesh, we don't have Magnus, we don't have Hikaru, we don't have Arjun Erigaisi or Pragnanda or any of the favorites to win this tournament. Instead, we have two underdogs, two very strong players, but still slight underdogs. Wei Yi, the super GM from China, the strongest Chinese player in the world today after surpassing Ding Liren. And on the other hand, we have Javokhir Sindarov, even lower rated, the Uzbekistan super GM. And these two players had to defeat so many strong players in a row to reach the finals here. They certainly deserve it. And let's see how this first game in the finals goes. All right, in the game, Javokhir, playing as white here, opens 1e4 best by test. And how will Wei Yi respond? Well, he's a big expert in the Sicilian defense, 1c5, but instead in this game goes 1e5. All right, Javokhir, knight f3. And now the main move here for black, of course, is going to be knight c6, inviting the Italian opening, the Ray Lopez, the Berlin defense, and so on. But instead, Wei Yi in this position plays two knight to f6, the Petrov defense. Now, a lot of Chinese players are big experts in this line right here, and it's a very solid defense. I mean, many top players, Caruana, Nepomniachtchi, and so on, love this opening for black. And the idea is simple. Black here does not defend the pawn on e5. Instead, he immediately counterattacks on the other pawn on the e4 square, inviting white to trade on e5, and black trades on e4, and so on. Now, in this game, Javokhir, he does not go for the absolute main line. The main line here involves taking on e5. Now, instead, the move he plays here is perhaps the second strongest line here for white. He plays d4, which is a very combative idea, opening the center and so on. And now we have all this tension. I mean, two white pieces here attacking the pawn on e5 and one black piece attacking on e4. So how will black respond in this game? Well, he takes on e4. Knight takes e4, the main move by far, and the standard Petrov move. Very often this opening, black here tries to capture that pawn on e4 with this knight. So very typical stuff here from black. Now, white here, bishop d3, simply attacking that knight on the e4 square. Black goes d5, defending, and now white has a few options. You can capture on e5 with the pawn, the knights, or castle, and so on. In the game, knight takes e5 is the move here for white, and black does go knight d7, pressuring e5 from white. Now here, white has many options. You can castle, you can go knight c3, knight d2, knight f3, and so on. There are a lot of options. In the game, though, the move here is simply short castles, castling the king. Now from here, black takes on e5. We have knight takes, d takes, and then knight c5. Going back with that knight and pressuring the bishop. And now, very importantly, that bishop, you really don't want to lose it that early in the game. First of all, those two Bs are so important. You can't lose one of them. And second of all, this bishop, it pressures the king side so well. If you lose this piece, I mean, it's almost impossible to attack black in these positions without that light squared bishop pressuring h7. So from here, what does white do? The strongest move here is simply going back with the bishop to e2. Now, it's a little passive, but it does keep that very important piece alive, and white is still sort of fighting for an edge in the opening. Now, instead, Javokhir here plays a different idea altogether. He plays the move here, f4. Now, this is a super double-edged idea. First of all, you give up the bishop on d3 if black wants it. Now, beyond that, you also weaken this diagonal right here to the king. On the other hand, you do gain space and set up the idea of f5 later in the game, maybe even f6. So it's a very double-edged, aggressive idea where white is sort of saying, I'm almost borderline all in on the king side. I want to attack, and it does make some sense. White here having the 4 versus 3 pawn majority on the king side, therefore attacking on this side of the board does make a lot of sense. From here, black takes on d3. We have knight takes, queen takes, and now a very precise move by Wei Yi. The move here is g6. Now, this is a very good multi-purpose idea. First of all, setting up the idea of bishop to f5, developing and hitting the queen on d3 with tempo. And beyond that, the bishop here may want to go to g7 and then, for example, castles. So overall, a very solid move here by Wei Yi. Now, Javokhir, bishop e3. And then we have, instead of bishop f5 right away, we have the intermediate move here, c5. Wei Yi playing a very precise idea. As soon as that bishop goes to e3, boom, c5 enters the game, threatening d4, pushing that piece back. And again, he waits until exactly the right time to do this, until the bishop goes to e3, and then he goes c5. Really precise stuff by Wei Yi in this game. All right, Javokhir plays a slightly shocking idea here. Knight c3. Okay, if you're a beginner, you should be able to see here, black has the chance to fork the white pieces with the move d4. Now, is that a good idea? I mean, obviously, Wei Yi, he sees this, and Javokhir, he's not going to play knight c3 without a good reason. He obviously knows that this right here is an okay move. Otherwise, why on earth would you play that in this position? He's got to have some idea. So, if you like puzzles, pause the video, trying to see why d4 may or may not be a good idea for black in this position. Well, it turns out black here plays d4, but white is ready for it. He plays in response knight to e4. Okay, the big question, can black win the bishop on e3? Is that a hanging piece? Well, the answer is yes, but you don't want to take it. If you do, white's attack is so strong, it's just it's stupid. For example, if black takes on e3 here, d takes, the move for white is knight to f6, hits the king, forces king to e7, almost the only move, the other one being taking the knight, which loses. So king e7, and then queen to b5. Jumping in with the queen, opening up the d file, rook a d1 is coming next, and white, despite being down an entire piece, the attack is so strong that white here is simply much better. You don't want this as black. This is just not a good idea at all. The king on e7, I mean, even Magnus Carlsen himself could not play this position. So instead, in this position right here, black does not take the bishop. Instead, bishop to e7 is the move. A solid idea. All right, Javokhir, bishop f2, retreating, and black finally bishop f5, pinning that knight on e4 to the queen on d3. A pretty solid move overall. All right, Javokhir. How does he continue? Well, first of all, he doesn't like that pin at all. Therefore, the move makes a lot of sense. Queen to e2, simply sliding out of the way of that pin. Very logical idea, very simple stuff. And black does castle. Now, so far, the game looks pretty normal overall. Yes, black has those two Bs. Black has some space in the queen side. White has some space in the king side. Overall, it's about even overall. But in this position, Javokhir finds a move that simply lights the board on fire. It is a very aggressive move, and from here, he's basically all in. Once you play this move, there is no going back. You cannot retreat the pawn. He plays the move g4, lighting the board on fire, hitting the bishop, and once you play it again, you are basically all in. You cannot go back. Your only idea now is basically f5, attacking on the king side. And this is not required. You could go, for example, knight to g3 or rook a to e1. There are plenty of ideas here that don't involve going all in on the king side. But Javokhir, being a very aggressive player, g4 is the idea. All right, black, what do you want to do right here? In the game, Wei Yi finds perhaps the most solid idea. That is simply bishop d7, retreating and keeping all the options open. Now, you can take on e4. The problem with that, though, once you do that, the queen flies into the e4 square, and that breaks the Fischer rule, which is you never want to trade pieces in a way that brings out your opponent's pieces to a better square like this. So white here is doing very, very well. So instead, in the game, bishop d7, retreating to a pretty safe square overall. All right, Javokhir, bishop g3, solid move, defending f4, e5, and opening up the rook on the f1 square to pressure the entire f-file. Now here, Wei Yi finds a really, really fantastic move. This move right here is, this is the stuff of super GMs. This is the stuff of like the 2750 players that below this, you just don't find these ideas. Now, black here has a wide variety of ways to continue. You can go, for example, bishop to c6, or queen to c7, or b6, or even c4. But the move Wei Yi finds right here, the move is just d3. That is a jaw-dropping idea. What's going on? Black here literally giving up the pawn two different ways for seemingly nothing at first glance. So what's the idea? Why would Wei Yi do this? And why is it so strong? First of all, the queen here it's overloaded. If you take on d3, the pawn on g4 hangs, black takes it, and black here is doing fantastic. The attack is basically over. Black has f5 completely under control. Now, instead, in the game, c takes is the move, obviously, but from here, black plays the move f5, gaining space on the king side here. Now, this is really insane stuff. The point being, now, when you go d3 like this diagonal is now opened up, and if white takes on f6, black takes back, and suddenly that diagonal is being taken over by the bishop, and that is what happens. We have e takes, bishop takes, and look at this. That is the idea behind d3 played earlier, opening up the scope of the bishop to pressure b2 and even the rook on a1 behind it. Wei Yi with the positional pawn sack to activate his pieces combined with f5. This is just brilliant stuff. All right, from here, Javokhir, rook a to e1, sliding over. Black, bishop d4 check, hits the king. All right, bishop f2 blocks the attack, and then bishop b5 pressures the queen and the pawn on d3 and e2. Wei Yi getting really fantastic play. I mean, look at every single piece here. The queen, the bishops, the rook. The only piece not in the game yet is the rook on the a8 square, whereas the white pieces, they're all sort of like, yes, they're well placed, but they're just passive right now. They're not actually doing anything yet, despite being pretty well centralized overall. All right, from here, Javokhir, queen to f3 is the move, sliding out of the way of the pressure of the bishop. And now, bishop takes b2, winning the free pawn. Simple chess. Now here, Javokhir makes a massive mistake. He plays the move rook to b1. Now, this is the most obvious idea in the world. You see the two b's on b2 and b5, and okay, rook b1 slides over, hits both bishops. What could be wrong with that? What on earth could be the problem? Rook b1 is the move, and here, Wei Yi, he spots, again, this guy, he spots the one flaw with this move. Queen takes d3 is the move, giving up the bishop. But the point being, if you take the bishop, it's checkmates in one move. Queen takes f1 is checkmate. The king cannot go anywhere. The queen being supported by the bishop. That is the problem. Rook b1 does not win anything. Black wins the pawn on d3 in response. What a turn of events here. Now, in the game, Javokhir, he trades on d3. Queen takes, but then bishop takes d3, hits the rook, and the knight. What a bishop. White here trades on b2, rook takes b2, and Wei Yi, bishop takes e4 is the move, winning the free piece back. And again, Wei Yi having a fantastic game here. Brilliant stuff. All right, Javokhir, rook takes c5 is the move. Bishop takes, winning that pawn on c5. Now, rook f to c8, sliding over, pressuring the piece. We have bishop d4, and now rook c4 flying down. And overall, the endgame is about even. White has that 3 versus 2 pawn majority on the king side, whereas black has the 2 versus 1 on the queen side. Therefore, both sides having 5 pawns, 1b, 2 rooks, and so on. It should be a pretty level endgame overall, but truly anything can happen here. All right, bishop e5 is the move. Rook d8. h3, and then rook d3. Wei Yi finding, again, very active squares for all of his pieces. All right, rook b3 offers the trade. Will Wei Yi go for it? No, he will not. Rook to c2, pressures a2. White can trade here, but that would not solve the problems either. We have rook takes. Now, the intermediate idea, rook g2 hits the king. The point being, the king here has one square, king to h1. But once you go there, the bishop is going to have all kinds of discovered attacks once the rook moves off g2. We have king to h1. Now, rook takes g4, check, hits the king. Rook d to f3 blocks the attack. Now, rook to g3 once again hits the rook. King to h2, rook takes, bishop takes, and in the end here, the end game, with these two b's being one light square b, one dark square, the game is going to be overall relatively drawish, but let's see what happens. We have a4, king f7, king g3, bishop c6, a5, b5, a takes, king f2, king e6, king e3, bishop g2, and overall, the game does slowly fizzle out into a draw. And because those two bishops are not on the same color, it's going to be very hard for either side to win. Both sides can have an easy fortress, and in the end, it's just not enough to win the game for either side. And both sides in this position do agree to a draw. So, wow, what a first game between Wei Yi and Javokhir Sindarov in the 2025 World Cup Finals. This tournament here has been insane. This first game, despite being a draw, having some really big fireworks, especially the move here, 15 G4, lighting the board on fire with some very interesting complications, especially my favorite move of the game happens to be the move here, 16 D3, really incredible stuff. Opening up this diagonal, setting up F5, and so on. Really fantastic stuff by both players in this game. So tomorrow, or today, when you see the video, both players, Wei Yi and Javokhir Sindarov, do play the second game in the finals. If they draw that one as well, then we have the tiebreak. So it will be very interesting to see what happens there. So stay tuned for that one. All right, guys, hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please smash that like button, comment down below. And real fast, this week we are launching my new paid coaching program, DR Mike Chess Pro. It's not live yet, but it will be very, very soon. Hint, hint, wink, wink. In the meantime, you can still join my free online community, drmikechess.com, but stay tuned for the announcement for the new paid community. It will be on sale for Black Friday. It is coming up very, very soon. So join if you want to, and I'll see you guys in the next video.